Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Nasr, and this is the Azure Cleveland User Group. A little bit about the group. We meet every month, typically every second week, and the meetings are free of charge and open to the public, regardless of the expertise level, whether you're a student, a hobbyist, or a working professional. In addition, we cover all topics related to Azure, whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. And you can find all the meeting information posted at meetup.com on our page at the link listed at the bottom of the slide. As always, a big thank you to our sponsors, the .NET Foundation for sponsoring the Meetup website, and NIS Technologies for sponsoring the virtual meeting space. Some general information if you're joining us for the first time. First and foremost, participation is encouraged. And like I always say, the only stupid question is the one not being asked. However, when not speaking, kindly ask you to mute your microphones just to avoid any background noise. And we want to keep it casual but organized, meaning feel free to jump in at any point in time. You don't necessarily have to wait for the speaker to pause for questions, or rather feel free to jump in either verbally or through the chat window. However, we want to keep enough time for our presenter to go through the demos and the slides. And lastly, the presentation is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube shortly after the editing process. So for tonight's presentation, it is making apps converse in natural language, and that is done by yours truly. So a little bit about me. You can find me on Twitter at Sam Nasr. I've been a software developer since 1995, and I'm a senior software engineer as well as trainer for NIS Technologies. I've been certified with a few certifications in Microsoft. Recently, I passed the AI 102 exam, and will be moving forward with the AI 204 exam. I'm also the president of the Cleveland C# User Group, as well as the Azure Cleveland User Group, i.e. this group. I've also authored multiple articles as well as videos for LinkedIn Learning. And I'm happy to say that I'm a 7-time Microsoft MVP. A little bit about the user groups that I mentioned. Both groups meet every month. They are free of charge and open to the public. And you can find the meeting information for the Azure Cleveland User Group at the link listed in the slide, as well as the Cleveland C# group, which essentially discusses all topics related to .NET. So without further ado, let's jump into tonight's presentation. And for starters, we want to discuss computer input. And as we see that the evolution of computer input has evolved from the punch cards, as we see in the lower left-hand corner, over into keyboard entry, and then we got into the pinch and zoom, and now we're actually able to speak and have our application speak back to us. And tonight we're going to take a closer look at how we can do that, all using the .NET framework. So, some terminology. CLU, or Conversational Language Understanding. This is the next generation of LUIS, also known as the Language Understanding Intelligence Service. And this is built on interactive machine learning, meaning that we train a machine learning model and we interact with it in order to get better results. And the end result is that we create a custom model, which afterwards, after we're done testing and we're able to publish that model, we can then access it as a REST API endpoint. That model will then accept a text string, a user input, such as I want to buy a car, I want to service my car, and then it will respond back with only the portion that the developer needs to interact with, meaning it will respond back with a token that we have identified earlier that is tied to the intent of what that user wants to do. So, going down the rabbit hole with the language understanding, there's actually a difference between natural language understanding and conversational language understanding. And that being, natural language is a subset of the natural language processing. It involves tasks such as intent recognition and entity extraction. And it's a broader concept that's used for various applications. With CLU, on the other hand, it is a specialized feature of Azure AI that builds on natural language understanding. And this allows us for creating custom models so that we can tailor it specifically for our application and be able to utilize it using our data. Essentially, what it does is it predicts the intent of a user's input and it extracts relevant information. For example, I can have a very long-winded sentence to say, I am very interested in buying a very nice Mustang. So I added a lot of adjectives in that sentence, but to boil it down, that intent is that I want to buy, or buy essentially as the verb, and then Mustang is the noun that I am hoping to get. So armed with that knowledge, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a language model. And the language model forms the basis of what the user means. So there are core parts to that language model. And so if you think about the English language, we have a sentence, and that sentence is composed of various parts. And more specifically, the fundamentals are a verb and a noun. So carrying that over into natural language understanding, essentially a sentence is referred to as an utterance. So an utterance would be, I want to buy a Mustang. The verb here is buy car, as the token that I set here. And you'll notice that it is set as one word, buy car, no spaces, and it's enclosed in double quotes. That is because that is the token that I assigned to that intent. Now, the noun of what I want to do is the vehicle itself. So that could be a Mustang, an Explorer, or vet, whatever it may be. But essentially, the core parts of the sentence are the verb and the noun. And of course, there are some additional words that go along with it, such as to and a and I, of course. Essentially, it's composed of a verb and a noun. That's really what we're concerned with as developers. So as I mentioned earlier, we submit that sentence to the service, and then it responds back with the top intent or the core parts that I, as a developer, am interested in. So what does that look like? Essentially, it's a JSON result set. So as we see here, this is the JSON that I get back from the service. And it states the query that I submitted was, I want to trade in my car. And so it categorized it as the intent of the user is essentially he wants to buy a car. Obviously, if you're trading in, that means you're bringing in your car and then you're going to be buying another car. And so it understood it as the intent as buy car. So that is the top intent. Now, as a user, when I speak, I could have multiple intentions. And let's focus on the context of being in a car dealership. So obviously, I could buy a car, I could get my car serviced, and I could do a variety of other things. So there's multiple intentions there, but that sentence that I submitted, or the query as stated in the JSON result set, is I want to trade in my car, and so it understood that as the intent of buying a car. So that is the top intent that is returned. Now you'll notice that it, in addition to top intent, it also returned a JSON array it also returned a JSON array of all the other possible intents, and then it assigned each one a confidence score. So buy car has a confidence score of 64% or 0.64. And then by default, there's always the none intent, meaning it doesn't know what the user wants. So that has a 0% confidence score. And so obviously, buy car is now the top intent. So I wanted to pause here and make sure everyone's with me. Let me take a peek in the chat window and see if there's any questions. So far, there appears to be none. But again, I encourage you to jump in with questions, either verbally or through chat. Richard, was that mic static or did you have a question?
I don't have a question.
Okay, no problem. All right, so moving right along. So how do we build our conversational language understanding app? As with everything in Azure, first it starts with setting up a resource in the Azure portal. And that's composed of several different parts. So first of all, I need to have a subscription. Second, I need to create a resource group. And then within that resource group, I need to create the language resource. And in our case, we're going to be creating a language service, quote unquote. Once that's created, I'll utilize the key and the endpoint from that resource. The next step is to set up the model in the Language Studio. And that is a separate portal that I will be accessing. And in there, I'll create my project, and then I'll create my intent, my utterance, and my entity. So if you recall, the utterance is the sentence, the intent is the verb, and entity is the noun. I will define all that. I'll provide examples, and then I will train it, make sure that I'm satisfied with the results, test it, and then deploy it. Once that model is deployed, the last and final step is to be able to access that model through an API endpoint from my C# application. So if you recall, we said that in step 1B, we're going to create a language resource, and there's a couple different resource types that we could create. So there is the cognitive service resource type, and that provides access to multiple AI capabilities. It supports language services, but it's not fully compatible with all the features in the Language Studio portal. The language resource type, on the other hand, is the more preferred type that we're going to work with, and that is designed for language-related tasks. It's fully compatible with all the features in Language Studio, and it has some functionalities that require a dedicated language resource within the portal. So from a bird's eye view, essentially this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be able to, so after we set up our, after we set up our infrastructure, meaning that we have our resource group, our resource, and we went to the Language Studio, we're essentially going to select the data, define the schema, meaning our utterance, and then within it, the intent and the entity. So that's going to be labeling the data. We're going to train the model and then look at the model performance. And if we're satisfied with it, we'll go ahead and publish it. If not, we'll feed it some additional utterances and label that data in order to improve performance. And as you see, it's a cyclical cycle between improved model and labeled data. It's essentially rinse and repeat until you're satisfied with the results. Once that's accomplished, then we can deploy the model, and then we can use it to predict intents and entities as the final step. And so with that, let's jump into our demo. And for that, we'll go over into the first and foremost. If you recall, we said we're going to go into our Azure portal. And as you see here, I already created my resource group, and I called it RG-CLU. And let me pause here for a second. I see a question. What is the anatomy of the CLU? LLM plus, why not use LLM API plus system prompt asking for JSON? Okay, so the intent of the language service, yes, you are building on a language model within the Language Studio, and you're able to customize it specifically to what your intent is. And I think it'll be better answered once we step through the finer points of the demo. Because it returns tokens that we are concerned with as developers. Then we can go through our data and be able to query that and identify the key points of what we want to do with our application. And you'll see what I mean once we get deeper into the demo. And so, as mentioned, I have my resource group created, and then within it, I'll select the language service. And that's already created. As we see here, we have the CLU demo v1. And then from there, I can get my necessary keys and then go over into Language Studio, which is language.cognitive.azure.com. Rolls off the tongue very easily, right? But essentially, that is the Language Studio. Within it, I'll create a new project. And in my situation, I called it Car Dealer Project. And once we click on that, then it will open up the project. And there we see that we have already a couple intents that are defined. So none is there by default, essentially. Buy car is the intent that I had created. What does that look like? If I click on that, it'll show you all the various utterances that will apply to that. All right. So I have some sample utterances that I provided. I said I would like to purchase a new Camaro, and I label Camaro as the car. Likewise, I need to get a C300, and I labeled that as the car. And you'll notice all of them have the intent of buy car, no space, because that is a token that I assigned. Same thing with a Mustang, and then I just left a loose definition of convertible without specifying a model, and also labeled that as car. Now I can also specify, so this is the training set. I can also specify a testing set. So I can test my model on it. And then here we have, I ask a question, do you have any Mustangs in stock? And I labeled Mustang as the car. And same thing, we're here, I just labeled new car as car here. I can also upload a file of utterances, which is going to be in JSON format, or I can have it suggest utterances. But I did everything manually for demo purposes. Now, the next thing I need to do would be to start a training job where I'm going to train it on the data that was provided. And you'll notice there's a message in yellow up above. You have not met the recommended minimum number of 10 utterances in your project before training. So as a minimum, it suggests 10 utterances. However, I'm going to ignore that and then proceed on with the training. And for the training model, let's call it, let me see, what was the naming convention that I used? Okay. So we're going to call this car, it's going to be a new model. We're going to call it car dealer and give it today's date, 0409. And we'll use the standard training mode. And we'll go ahead and click train. Now, if you notice, I have two options here for the data splitting. I can have it where it automatically splits the test data that I provided, or I can use a manual split of 67:33. Again, that will vary depending on the data that I provided. I'll go ahead and click train. It'll take a moment to train the model. And while it's doing that, I'll get a drink. So that will take just a moment until it's trained. Now, as you see here, these are two different versions that I had deployed previously on March 18th and March 19th to be specific. And as we'll see in just a second, after it's done, we'll be able to deploy this model, and it should be done fairly shortly. All right, while we're waiting for that, well, we can jump to the code and see what that code looks like. So what I did is I created a console application, and essentially I have to import some namespaces that I'll be utilizing for the language, as well as JSON. Within my main method, there are two key aspects that are important to me, the endpoint and the API key. Now, those should be kept under lock and key, no pun intended. And so I put them in my config file. You can obviously put them in your key vault, or you could use them as environment variables, a variety of different ways for hiding it, but you definitely want to keep those more secure. Then what I do here is I instantiate a URI endpoint, as well as instantiating an Azure credential. And then I'm specifying my project name and the deployment name. Next, I'm going to instantiate the data that will be passed in. So I'll pass in a sample text of, I want to buy a Corvette. And then there are some additional variables that go along with it. So this ties into the conversation that I would be carrying with if I had a production level application. Obviously, I want to maintain the context, if you will, or continuity of a conversation. So I would assign it a unique identifier as we see here, there we go. I would give it a unique identifier and as well as a participant ID of who submitted that request to kind of keep things in check, because if I have multiple calls from multiple users to that model, I want to keep that continuity for each one separate. And so that's what the ID and participant ID allow me to do. Then I'll make the call, submit that data, and then get the response back. And then with the response, I'm going to identify the content stream and then be able to look at my top intent. I'll display that as well as display all the other intents that came back. And same thing with the entities. So what this is going to do is essentially submit the requests, get the response back, and then dump everything out in JSON format so we can better view it on the screen. And so let's go ahead and run that. And there we see everything that came back. So the top intent is by car. Came back with a confidence score of 0.80 or 80%. And then it gave me a breakdown of everything in that sentence. So the category of the entity is car. More specifically, it was identified as Corvette. It was found at position 16 for a length of 8, and it has a very high confidence score. Okay. Everyone with me so far? Any questions? And Marshall, I didn't forget about your question. You'll see where this comes in handy in just a little bit. But any questions so far? Yes, Marshall, go ahead.
I was just saying thank you for addressing my question.
Oh, you're very welcome, but it hasn't been fully addressed yet. You'll better see the magic and the beauty of it in the following demo that will take it a step further. And with that, before proceeding, I wanted to ask again, any other questions or comments? All right. So what I did is I also have an additional demo that essentially builds on what we talked about. And it's the same scenario with a car dealership, except I'm pointing to a different model that has other intents built in as well, such as service vehicle. And so what this does is, let me go ahead and run it. It basically serves as if it was a car kiosk at a dealership, right? So we have this window that comes up asking, what can I do for you? We have a button here that you can press it to speak. And then what it will do is then it will utilize speech services, as we see in the code here. So here I have my button speak _ click. What this will do is it will take that text, it will take that verbiage, that spoken verbiage, convert it into text. And as we see here, so this makes a call to another speech service, sends it that voice recording that I submitted. It will return text back. And then from there, we'll call Lewis Parse. And what Lewis Parse is, it'll do the same thing that we saw, where we'll submit it to the language model and then get the intent back. So Lewis Parse will essentially make another call to the URI, as we see here. Once it gets the response back, we check to see that the status code is successful. And then we'll start dissecting to see which one is the top intent. And we have multiple intents that could come back, whether it's by car, service car, or of course none. Okay, well, let's step through that in more detail. And so we'll close this one out. And we have our UI here. I'll click the speak button. I want to buy a Ford Mustang. So there, it took my text, my spoken text, spoken words, I should say. Now, I don't want to mix up the language and the terminology. Um, and what it did is it brought back the text. And as we see here, I want to buy a Ford Mustang. Notice I didn't type anything in. It was all spoken. So it converted that to text. And then we called Lewis parse, which is the method right below it. And then from here, we made a call to another model, very similar to the one that I just demonstrated. We're checking to see that the status code is successful. And then we're getting the top intent back. And then we're dissecting it. Now, this models.car, what this is, I'll show you basically this is essentially hard-coded data. So I have my class here for car, which essentially includes the 5 basic properties: ID, year, make, model, and color. And then I have some data that's hard-coded here for the vehicles that I have in stock. And so I'll be referencing that similar as if I was going out to a database and retrieving what I have in inventory. And then the next step, it's checking to see what the intent was. And in this case, it was buy car. And then we're going to respond back to the user and say, we have X number of cars in stock. And when I run that to completion, we see the result is we have 3 cars in stock displayed to the user based on what the user's intention is. Now, let's do another example and say, I need an oil change. Again, we got the text, we submitted it to the service, and now we're checking what the intent is. And in this case, it is service car. So we're going to have a generic message to say the next available service appointment is, and it's going to be 7 days in advance. And there we see displaying it to the user. So now the whole point of this and the beauty of it is we're able to take spoken language, natural spoken language. Notice I didn't have to structure my sentence in any specific way, just followed the basic rules of English, spoke to it as if I was talking to a clerk or a salesman, stated what I wanted, and then it was able to decipher what is it that I was after, whether it's buy car, service car, or what other intent I had. And then once I get that intent token, then I'm able to go through my application and then be able to maneuver and respond to the user accordingly. So I told the user, i.e. me, that we have 3 cars in stock. I told him that our next service appointment date is 1 week from today. So I'm able to have a dialogue with my customer simply by spoken language and then being able to go and parse my data or query my data and then respond back accordingly. Now, after saying all that, does that answer your question, Marshall?
I don't think it answers my question because I think that the same result can be obtained by just using an LLM API and just asking the model to return a JSON formatted in this way. I don't understand what a CLU is different than an LLM.
So with a CLU, I'm able to identify the intent and then get a token from it. Now, with a language model, essentially I'm getting JSON back of essentially what the user had said. I've never tried it, but can you essentially dissect it into the user's intention of the exact verb that they want to do?
The large language models can do practically all of that and return it as a JSON or 3 boxes. I did that a year ago.
Okay. But more specifically, let me go back to the
It's
first demo.
overkill. It's overkill to do that because you don't necessarily need a huge LLM, but I do believe that most of the largest of them can do that either in 0 shot or you show it what you want and it'll do it.
Okay.
With a system prompt is what I was getting at.
So this is built on a large language model. It's just customized to identify the actual intents. I
Yeah, I
haven't
mean, if
used
it's 100% reliable, then why not? If it's cheaper, why not? I'm just saying. I think that in a pinch, you could do the same thing with an LLM and just ask it to send a JSON that you can parse with your code.
yeah, I haven't explored that. And I,
You just have to tell it return a JSON and no other comments. Just
mhm,
tell it you're using a program to parse and you want it to return a JSON with these keys and fill in the values from the text in that follows. And usually, most of them are smart enough to just shut up and give you what you want.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious to see what demo you have of that, and can experiment with it.
Well, if you give me a link to your text, your sample text data, whatever, I might be able to simulate it and show it to you with a share.
Okay, that would be nice. Sure. All right. So, getting back into our portal. So, as we see here, the training job is completed. And if we go back into deployments, so we already have 2 deployments. I can add in a third and select from the models that I had trained. And we'll give it the same thing. Let's call it 2025 0409. And that will also take a minute to deploy as well. Now, that deployment is completed. Now I can test my deployment. I can select from a list of the various deployments that I have and enter in some sample text to get the results, and say I would like to purchase a vehicle. Now we'll run the tests, and then it comes back with a top intent of buy car. I can view the JSON directly into a different tab. Now, if I want to modify my schema where I want to add in additional things, so I can go back into my schema definition and I can add in another intent. Let's say I need to wash car, for example, have them wash it for me after my service. So I can add in an intent. Now, for every intent, I need to specify a sample utterance. So for wash car, and I can say, so I can give it an example of the statement of the utterance, specify that I would like to have my car washed, and specifying that here is the car. Click Save Changes, and then I would go through the testing process again, and then redeployment, and then be able to access it through the application. So once that's said and done, and I've trained it and modified it, now going into project settings, I have my primary key available to me here, where I can use that as well as the API key, as well as the URI, in order to include that in my application and be able to access it. All right. Any questions? Okay. So once that's completed, now what else can you do with it? So within the Language Studio, there's a variety of different features where you can extract text, and specifically certain types of text, so such as personal identifiable information, or PII. You can find linked entities relating to links on the web. extract named entities or health information. So a variety of different things that you could do, and notice that's just under one tab, under extract information. You can also use it for classifying text, understanding Q&A, and language understanding. So plenty to do and plenty available within the conversational language understanding realm. So what have we discussed here today? Would like to hear your feedback. What new things have you come across that you found interesting? What other questions can I answer for you? And if not, we can continue moving forward. So if you're interested in having a proof of concept or a demo or a training class, NIS Technologies offers this as a class as well. In addition, be able to help you with a proof of concept and get this off the ground if you're looking to launch a kiosk similar to what we discussed. I'd be happy to help you with that. And I'll share my contact information in just a little bit. However, the recording for YouTube is going to be let me rephrase it. The link for YouTube is going to be available. I can't get my words straight. The recording will be available on YouTube in just a few short days, and let me share the link with you. So if you look over into the chat window, you'll see that there are several links that are provided. One of them is the link for the YouTube channel. And if you would please subscribe to that to get upload notifications. In addition, tech events, which we'll cover in just a second, are also posted on my blog, and you can subscribe to that to stay updated. And last but not least, if you would please take a moment to fill out the feedback eval form. I'm always open to constructive criticism. As far as events that are happening in the area, and actually online as well, on April 10th is the Roanoke Valley.net user group, and that's going to be held online. In addition, on April 17th is the Glug.net, or the Greater Lansing user group for .net users, and that's going to be on Thursday, April 17th. And that specific meeting is going to be interesting because they're going to be discussing what it takes to become a Microsoft MVP. And Betsy Weber from Microsoft will be presenting. So for those that are interested in becoming an MVP, I encourage you to check that out. And then on April 23rd, which is the fourth Wednesday of the month, is going to be the Cleveland C# user group. And the meeting for that is already posted online. As far as online events or additional online events, April 11th is the Global AI Bootcamp from Cleveland. That's going to be happening online. It's free of charge. You can find the link for that over on my blog. That is an all-day event of various AI-related topics. We have speakers from all over the U.S., and it's going to be an all-day event from 8 to 5. Also, StirTrek.com, and let me pull up the link for that. So for those of you not familiar with StirTrek, that is a all-day event that's going to be held in Columbus, Ohio. And the cool thing about it is it's held in a movie theater where they have the speakers presenting on the large cinema-size screens. And then at the end of the day, then they have a private screening of Marvel's Thunderbolts for all the attendees. Pretty cool event, and I still proudly wear a t-shirt from previous StirTrek events. So it's a pretty interesting event. I encourage you to attend if you're in the Columbus area or near it. And then on Friday, August 1st, is Cincy Deliver. That's going to be happening in Cincinnati. And again, that is an all-day conference of various topics related to .NET as well as other technologies. In addition, they also have other agile topics that are on the schedule. If you're in the job market, I encourage you to check out devitjobs.com. Pretty interesting website that allows you to select on different technologies, location and geography, as well as whether the job is remote or in person. So again, that is devitjobs.com. If you need to reach me for any questions or comments, you can find all my social links over on Linktree/Sam Nasr. Well, more specifically, my email, snasr@nistechnologies.com. Again, my link tree. And then if we're not connected on LinkedIn, please let's do so. So you can find me on LinkedIn as Sam Nasr. And with that, if there are no questions or comments, I thank you all for attending. Look forward to seeing you all next month.